Hey guys, welcome back to Library of Wealth. Today we have Chamath giving us his prediction for the current market. International conflict has been driving inflation and interest rates, as well as stocks and crypto markets crashing in the past week. Chamath discusses how those markets will be affected by the uncertainty globally and what the next year could potentially have in store. Chamath has been very accurate with his market predictions within the past year, up to and including exiting his crypto position and shifting his investment thesis more towards stocks. This has led to warnings for investors to be aware of the market conditions following the Fed rate hikes and the current inflation we're seeing. Please stick around to the end of the video as Chamath gives us his predictions for the last half of the year and what to expect with stock, crypto, and financial markets. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy the content we do here on this channel. Let's get right into the video.
Well, I think that we're in the midst of what I would call a melt-up. So, probably the next month and a half, there really isn't much quote-unquote bad news that hasn't been priced in. The thing that I've learned over the last few years is that markets don't actually care what the news is. They can process good news and bad news equally well. What they despise is the uncertainty of what the news could be. And so this week was really important because we had two huge buckets of uncertainty taken out of the market. So the one we've already talked about, which is when the market saw that there was a surface area of a deal between Ukraine and Russia that was really constructive, because neither side would have signaled something if both parties were very far apart. So that meant to the markets, we're a few weeks out from something getting done. And then the second thing was Jerome Powell and the Federal Reserve. They finally had their meeting. They raised rates 25 basis points. But even more importantly, they gave you a very prescriptive forecast of what the next year will look like at a minimum, and possibly even 2 years. And once you could have that, you were able to then go and redo all of your expectations. And what people realized was, okay, inflation may actually start to get tamed in the back half of the year. The economy is still quite strong. And we could actually support 2.5% interest rates and still actually grow really well.
Chamath goes on to say that one thing to keep an eye on is global escalation and how that's priced into the current market for this year. He also talks about the retail signals and how you can make money from doing the opposite of what those markets are doing. Chamath also talks about when the time to buy is and why it's important to have access to that information.
What you've seen in the last 3 or 4 days is a reaction to the loss of uncertainty. And so there really isn't, the only thing, the fly in the ointment could be if the war all of a sudden escalates. Not that it gets dragged on, because at that point that's also, I think, been priced in. But if something very meaningfully different and Russia in this case ratchets up the intensity by going, nuclear or something else, although I think that's a very long tail.
Chemical weapons seems a possibility, or carpet bombing.
I think these are all very, very low probability events. But in the absence of these things, you basically have really constructive dynamics right now for at least the next month and a half, maybe even 2 months.
How much of this has to do with retail investors who were YOLO, hodlers, speculators, stimmy checks, getting super active for 2 years and then maybe getting super spooked right now and maybe needing the money to deploy in their lives?
Look, the thing to remember, and I hate to be this blunt, but it's true, retail is not a very good signal of anything. In fact, if you actually look at retail flows, typically you will make money by doing the exact opposite of what retail does. And I posted this in the group chat to you guys. Every single day of since the beginning of this year, retail was a net buyer. In all of those days, the market got punched in the face. Finally, at the beginning of March, retail capitulated, right? And I posted that same day and I said, guys, this is the moment to buy. And lo and behold, what happened? The markets rallied meaningfully from that point. And the reason is because they were going into the end of Q1. You have a huge tax bill due in April 15th. People were starting to just finally give up. They were buying every single day and they finally gave up. But that capitulation was the moment that you buy. So if anything, retail is the, I've said before, you fade your fade list. Retail flows are something you typically will make money by fading, by doing the exact opposite of whatever retail is doing. And you just need to have access to that information. If you have access to it, you can kind of profit from it. So where are we going from here? Probably up.
Strongly, because, it went up considerably just on hopes that it might be signed. But on the other hand, if this peace process falls apart, I think the market will give back all those gains and then some. I think we are nowhere near out of the woods on all the risky scenarios that could develop from this war. This situation could still spin out of control. So, I think in the absence of a peace deal, and then finally we have all the risks of recession, we definitely are seeing a slowdown in the economy right now. And I think if this war continues and we don't get the spring planning and things keep, deteriorating, I think we're headed for a very serious recession in this country. I think we'll go from slowdown to recession. So if I were advising Biden, of course, no one's listening to me, but if I were advising Biden, I would be telling Biden, listen, Mr. President, we are going to have a horrible midterms in November. And, we are going to have a really hard time in 2024 if this war continues and, we head down into a recession or any of the other catastrophes that could happen. We need to push for a peace deal right now. And the U.S. should be playing a constructive role, and we should be applying pressure wherever we can to make a deal, because the broad contours of this deal, to Chamath's point, have been set.
So our track record is not super good.
Yeah, no, I think regime change is like chasing some one-outer or something.
If we were a company at some point, we would have been pipped for our ability to do regime change.
No, I don't think it's a great strategy. I'm not necessarily advocating for it, but
I'm not saying that. I'm saying whether or not it's a good strategy. I think that we are particularly not good at it.
Yeah, we need a performance improvement plan on that front.
Well, I think we should just stop trying that. We shouldn't be going for a regime change. Well,
this is a good question. You and I had this thing where I said, you and I are in sync that we both want to contain dictators and maybe isolation. And you were like, I'm not into isolation. So I think a definition of what is the strategy for containment going forward post a peace deal with Russia, and isolationism, I guess is a bit of a trigger word and it's loaded, but
I'm not an isolationist.
Deal with the next person.
I would describe my strategy as selective engagement, meaning that we still engage internationally on behalf of vital American interests and our core interests, but we don't stick our fingers in the pie of the internal affairs of all these countries all over the world to try and foment regime change, standing up to China in the sense that we do not want them dominating Asia and becoming a peer competitor to the United States that can then challenge us all over the world. So
more pragmatist on it. And
I would be more pragmatist.
We can be isolationist with North Korea because there's literally nothing they can do for us.
And look, I would not be throwing countries like Turkey and Egypt and Saudi Arabia out of our coalition in Cold War II because we don't like the nature of their governments. And I'm not saying I support autocracy. I don't.
No,
but the reality is
dialogue is reasonable, because if you don't, then the other side will.
The foreign policy playbook is going to get fundamentally rewritten after this Russia-Ukraine war, in large part because of the effectiveness of government sanctions plus corporate social responsibility, whatever you want to call that, CSR function.
Public sentiment,
wokeism,
cancel culture, whatever you want to call it. Yes, I agree.
But the combination of these two things has proved to be incredibly effective at setting the stage for some sort of compromise or regime change. The spectrum of outcomes is there. But the point is, that's an incredibly unique set of circumstances where before we never would have thought an economy that large or a country that important on the world stage would ever have compromised in the absence of military intervention. And I think that that's important to think about as we think about what our forward-going China policy looks like. I think really the importance of the OECD, right? The importance of all these organized nations that consume from China. I said this before in a tweet, but the importance of the US dollar has become completely primary, which has been an incredible benefit of what has happened because of this war. Very small silver linings in the grand scheme of all of this humanitarian crisis, but those are going to be really important things that the United States can seize on. So, we may in some ways have had some diminished power in order to facilitate peace in this conflict. But the downstream capital that we could accumulate by organizing these countries more effectively, I think could be really important. And then separately, we have to have a moral conversation in the United States about all these things like environmental laws, like our approach to agriculture that may have been underwritten.
Absolutely, yes.
With faulty logic.
Because the Fed has been buying securities and giving individuals money, the effects of quantitative easing could be seen all over the market when they raised rates by 50 basis points. Chamath believes we're about to enter a phase of quantitative tightening in which they'll be able to sell the same securities and recoup their losses. The Federal Reserve is focused on keeping inflation under control, which has investors concerned as the U.S. economy sends mixed signals regarding market development. While you might expect greater discussion about the Fed delaying interest rate hikes, all indicators are that the Fed will be less market reactive than in the past. Despite the fact that the market is currently based on fear, the coming months will provide a clear indication of what to expect from the stock, crypto, and capital markets up until the end of the year. This recession will have the greatest impact on the regular consumer, and we'll have to keep an eye on the credit and housing markets for signs of financial corrections as well. Loan interest rates are rapidly rising, and Chamath believes we may be witnessing a bubble. What do you think about Chamath's take on the market conditions right now? Comment down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. This is Library of Wealth. We'll see you in the next video.